right, so welcome to the only podcast where I can talk and listen to my voice, and you, Joe, can also talk and listen to your voice. How amazing is that?
But there's only one podcast for that?
Yeah, the only one podcast where the two of us can actually talk and listen to our own voices.
We might have to change that. We'll have 7 other ones.
Oh, that'll change it. Two sport bros, two movie bros, two political bros. But maybe not take political into this.
It'll actually be political and religious bros.
Oh, yeah, the two things we can't talk about. Yeah, you know what we can talk about, and I want to talk about, is the winter meetings, because honestly, this has been a much more active winter meetings than in the last 2 years. The last 2 years, it was quiet, nothing was happening.
Yeah, we had a lot of late signings, too.
Yeah, last year, the talk through March was, uh, where is Manny Machado and Bryce Harper going to sign? We don't have to worry about that. The three best free agents have all gone off the board already.
Yeah, I mean, like last year, Dallas Keuchel didn't even sign till like halfway through the year or something like that.
Same thing with Craig Kimbrell.
Yeah, it was crazy.
And now we might still worry about it, but maybe it's not as impactful free agents as last year. And it all honestly started off with a bang, with the Nationals agreeing on Monday, the first full day of the winter meetings, to re-up on a new contract with Steven Strasburg, locking up pretty much their franchise, their face of the franchise after Ryan Zimmerman, who looks to be departing or retiring at the end of the season. But it's a 7-year deal, $245 million, and we know it's a good deal for the Nationals. We know it's a good deal for Strasburg. But you want to know what it's a very good deal for? And we'll get into this later. Garrett Cole. Because Scott Boras is the agent for both Steven Strasburg and Garrett Cole, the two best pitchers on the market.
Yes.
And everyone was going into the winter meeting saying, oh, we'll sign Garrett Cole first. That way we can circle back to Steven Strasburg, who will obviously be available at the end. And not only is Strasburg not available at the end of Monday, but he also signed a record deal. So two things just happened. One, there's no fallback option for the Yankees or the Angels or the Dodgers for getting to Strasburg if Cole's gone. With both Strasburg and Zach Wheeler, who signed earlier with the Phillies, off the board, they have to go further down the board to Madison Bumgarner or Hungjin Ryu, who are good pitchers in their outright, but they're not
Garrett Cole
caliber.
or Strasburg.
No. And then two, they were saying maybe 270, 280 for Garrett Cole. The fact that Strasburg was able to get 245 over 7 years meant that there was no way Cole was not taking a deal without reaching $300 million or more. On his deal.
As soon as I heard that with Strasburg, I was like, he's gonna crack 300.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a big thing, getting Strasburg signed first. I'm always curious how like Scott Boras he gets like some of these contracts, and that like with conflicting things. Like he's such a thriving force in the free agency market, and he just sort of like dictates where players are going to be going, more or less.
I mean, it also helps that his free agents are always the best free agents. Like, you always go into an offseason and Boras has at least 2 or 3 of the top free agents on the market.
No, but I want to know, like, with negotiating things, like, if he's like, oh, well, I mean, if I'm getting my 5% commission, like, how much can I milk money and be like, Steven, don't go to the Yankees, go to the Nationals this year, do this, do that. So I just always want to know, like, how much sway he really has. And then priority-wise, too, because, I mean, if he's going to stack players here and there, and then he's got to fill out the other pieces, too. So, I don't know. I guess he's got a whole team with him.
Yeah, I mean, the Nationals are a team that is well documented that they've had in their history a lot of Scott Boras clients, and for those that had the rare time where they waited out the market for a while and were having trouble finding a spot, the Nationals were always a team that the owner called up Boris and said, "Hey, we want to sign your guy. You want to come in and have a martini, and we'll hammer this out."
Yep.
But it also has to deal with market forces. Going back to the Bryce Harper that from last offseason, the problem with Bryce Harper was not a lot of teams were in the market for a right fielder. That the Phillies obviously had said they were going to spend stupid money, but
And they did.
yeah, but the Yankees weren't in on seriously on Harper. Uh, the Dodgers weren't in on Harper that seriously. Mid-market teams weren't really in on the big free agents. Like the White Sox made a play at Manny Machado, but it was so structurally worded that it was so convoluted that even though it was more money than what the Padres wound up giving him, Manny Machado said, "No, I'm not going to take this deal." That or no one really wants to go to the south side of Chicago, which could also honestly be true.
Yeah,
but
it's sad.
but going into this offseason, the biggest need by a ton of teams was starting pitching. And by Tuesday night, it was very apparent that Garrett Cole was going to sign at the end of the night. And it was going to come down to the Yankees, who couldn't get enough pitching with how many guys were hurt or ineffective last year.
Mm-hmm.
The Angels, who had only one pitcher out of all of last year to top 100 innings, which is amazing
Pitiful.
to think of. And the Dodgers, who you would think would have enough pitching, except for the fact that they haven't been able to close the deal on the World Series in their their recent 7 year stretch. And it came down to that the Bronx is getting Cole for Christmas.
They're the evil empire. They're
Yeah,
the bad guys. Of course they're
yeah,
getting coal for Christmas.
yeah.
Duh.
Yeah, I actually the other day I went to Radio City, the Christmas show, and
Mm-hmm.
I was half expecting them to say the Santa Claus to say that because he has like sort of a pseudo stand up point at the beginning. It's all scripted, but I
Yeah.
was half expecting to hear that that he said, "I give all the good boys and girls presents, and all the bad guys get coal," or just the Yankee fans.
Yeah, that would have been good.
But anyway, it's a massive deal. 9 years, $324 million, the third most expensive contract ever behind Bryce Harper and Mike Trout, and
Mm-hmm.
also includes a opt out after 5 years. So, which I expect if he does well, it's going to be treated like CC Sabathia. That
Mm-hmm.
after 5 years they negotiate, maybe get a six, maybe make it so that it's a 10 or 11 year pact at the end, and Cole finishes out his career.
Now, my only concern now is the Yankees' rotation. What order do you put everybody in? I mean,
Well,
obviously you want Cole starting first, but
Cole is definitely hands down number one.
like Tanaka's either lights out or everyone hits home runs off him, and then Paxton towards the end of last year had a very very good
Yeah,
stretch.
on
But we've seen stretches like that happen before, where guys are lights out for the second half, and then just fall apart the following year. I mean, we saw that with like Jake Arrieta and other pitchers.
J.A. Happ.
Yeah, so I'm still not keen on Paxton. I like him. I think he's a good pitcher, but uh, I don't think you put him as your number two guy. But then you have in Severino, who was the ace of your team. But we did our breakdown last week, and we both said Tanaka was our pitcher to pick. So do you have Tanaka as two, or do you have Severino as two?
Well, the
Uh,
thing is he Tanaka was my pitcher to pick because of his postseason pedigree. That
hmm
in the postseason he is as good as Garrett Cole. The regular season has not been as kind. So I how I break it down after Cole is that the ball is in Severino's court to see if he's the number two. If not, he'll be number 3, and Paxton will be a very capable number 2. We all forget that even with his early season struggles, that Paxton was striking out pitchers at a rate that we haven't seen since Sabathia's prime days, if not even more than that. I mean, that all obviously eats up pitches, but
Yeah.
that's beside the point. So, uh, Tanaka is a very good number 4 pitcher, and then the number 5 slot shakes out however it can. Do we keep J.A. Happ? Does Jordan Montgomery come back? Do we call up Devi Garcia? But the Yankees with Garrett Cole just slammed a lot of uncertainty into the trash, and now have one of the game's better, if not I'd say one of the top 5 rotations in baseball.
Yeah, we haven't seen the Yankees in like a top 5 starting rotation in I don't know how many years. I
Yeah,
mean,
heck, not even 2009, you would say,
yeah,
considering they had to basically trot out Sabathia, Burnett, and Pettit every 3 days in the
yeah,
postseason.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Uh, yeah,
that's
so
it's been a while.
yeah, and the best thing about it is that subtracts from the Astros. Not that they were going to re-sign
No.
him anyway, or that they may even have a legitimate shot at contending, whether based on roster, based on division, or based on punitive action. But it's always good to just steal someone from a rival.
Yeah,
Like,
I was telling my dad that I thought the biggest loser, because like we just agreed, the Astros weren't going to re-sign him. He didn't even seem happy after they lost the World Series.
no,
That being in
he
Houston.
immediately said,
Yeah,
"Well, I'm not a part of his team," which saying like, "Well, he's done with that."
yeah. I thought the biggest loser was the Angels, and then of course we'll get into it next. I presume with
Yeah,
Rendon, they signed him instead to a very nice contract as well. But I thought the Angels really needed another good starting pitcher. They haven't had like a good starting pitcher since before Jared Weaver went down.
yeah.
Um, and Mike Trout's got that massive contract. He's easily the best player in the world, and he has what 0 playoff wins, 3 games, all being
He
swept.
has 8. I think they tracked. He has spent 81 days in first place over his entire career.
Yeah, that's
And that's
it.
what makes the Anthony Rendon deal hard to judge at this point. 7 years, 245, so almost the same as his former teammate Steven Strasburg. But the problem is Cole by himself, even if the Angels had gotten him, wouldn't have helped the
No,
Angels.
no,
The
he wouldn't have helped them, but it might have been enough to get like, say, an extra 10 games under their belt,
Yeah, but
and that could. And I know the Rays have been doing a lot better. Red Sox are still a force. The Yankees are a force. But maybe those 10 extra wins is just something enough to get you into those playoffs, and then someone gets hot and just clobbers the hell out of the ball.
yeah. But
Uh,
what I'm getting at is they don't need one starting pitcher.
yeah,
They
they
need
need multiple.
three.
Yeah,
That the so far the biggest acquisition on the pitching side is Dylan Bundy.
mhm.
Dylan Bundy is not going to get them to the playoffs, and so the Rendon deal on paper is good. It makes the Angels have one of the better lineups in baseball with Otani, Rendon, Trout. There's Tommy La Stella, the breakout star from last year, Justin Upton. But if they don't have any pitching, they're not getting anywhere. They need to sign multiple versions of Madison Bumgarner, Hungjin Ryu,
well, that's why I said they
and
were the
and
biggest
we
loser, because I figured if Cole could sign there, they'd be able to lure maybe a good number 2 to go with them, and maybe a solid number 3 to follow up,
yeah.
and then that could help stack that. But
I
they
mean
lost
there
out on that Cole, and
yeah.
it just sort of fell apart. But
There are other options out there. I've been hearing that the Indians are very likely to trade either one of Kluber or Francisco Lindor, and so if they or even a Carlos Carrasco. So that trade avenue is another way that the Angels could fill in that vacancy, but that they need to get starting pitching because if their biggest acquisition is Rendon and they don't have any meaningful starting pitching,
That's not going to help him.
this deal backfires badly.
Yeah, so I mean, it's good plate protection, and you need key hitting to win a championship, but pitching wins you a championship.
Yeah, at the
Um,
very least, they save some money by dealing off injured Zach Cozart, who was their former third baseman,
mm,
off to the Giants in what amounted to a prospect buy by San Francisco, but that saved them about uh, $13 million that they could reinvest half of in Rendon.
just as like a side thing, just because I saw something about it, it said the Astros might be looking to unload some money with like maybe Carlos Correa.
Yeah, I did see that as
I,
well.
I don't like it. He's not your best player on the team, but he's still a very capable player when healthy, and especially that he's like one of the cornerstones of your rebuilding franchise that's now won a World Series, been in two with some asterisks.
Yeah,
Um, but I mean, it's sports, it's business. I guess things need to happen.
I mean, it says the same thing that the reason they couldn't re-sign Cole, who would help a lot because Verlander and Greinke aren't getting any younger,
No, no.
is that they maxed out their payroll.
Yeah.
And Houston at the moment is getting. I'd say it's getting close to being a baseball market, but it's not quite to the point where it can support the Dodgers or the Yankees. And that's the unfortunate thing of the window. Even with the the investigation, even putting that aside, the window was looking a little tedious for them because they haven't developed homegrown starting pitching, and that's kind of how I see a franchise. That franchise can get to the World Series by buying uh, by working the homegrown player route and then buying starting pitching. But in order to sustain it, they need to develop their own young starting pitching to offset the hefty salaries later in the dynasty. And we're not just seeing that out of the Astros. We're seeing that out of the Cubs as well. That they're making signals that they are, I'd say at this point, 80-20 are going to move star third baseman Chris Bryant
Yeah,
this
there's
offseason.
another thing I heard.
Yeah, not just because of the fact that it's the right market that a lot of teams need third baseman and there are only Rendon and Josh Donaldson as quality options, but they even said last year that they've run out of payroll, which is amazing to say about Chicago. That Chicago has run out of money because that's kind of the third city that could support a big team like New York and Los Angeles can,
Hmm.
and that's what that's what caused them to bounce out of contention last season. Why Joe Madden was let go because they couldn't field him with a playoff caliber team.
Yeah, no, they just didn't have the pieces anymore. And one of the things I'm worried about, yes, the Yankees have Cole for like at least 5 more years, depending on
Yeah,
the opt out. Um, but they also have a lot of these young stars who aren't paid that much right now, and who are gonna easily command at least $200 million on their like possible deals, and uh, it's how you keep everybody. I mean, that's why the Yankees really couldn't keep Didi. Um, so as much as I mean, he only signed that what 1 year, 14 million with the Phillies.
yeah.
So while that's
It,
not a massive amount, it's still like enough to say, hey, we're not gonna need you right now, and especially in the future. So
yeah,
I find that really hard. I can't pick favorite players anymore.
yeah.
But
Well,
it.
I'll tell you this: that next year is the last year on the current deals for Tanaka and Paxton. Both of them they
Mm,
could walk away from if they desire. That's about $30 million. DJ's $12 million. I hope they re-sign him. but
Yep.
there's that. So remember what I said about homegrown starting pitching, that they have a lights out guy named Devi Garcia that is going to factor into the majors at some point the next season, barring injury. And I also forgot to mention J.A. Happ's salary is also gone as long as he doesn't vest his 2021 option. And even if he does, I imagine they'll try to find a taker for him.
Yeah.
So that's money that can be reinvested. If Devi Garcia can prove himself, if Jordan Montgomery can get back on track, because we forget he was he
It's
was a
pretty
rock
good.
in the rotation in 2017, and we all forget it because he got injured last
Yeah.
season. But if those two can step up in the rotation, that'll answer a lot of questions in terms of saving payroll money. Because by the time that they'll be costing money, that we'll have made decisions on whether we're keeping Gary Sanchez or whether we're keeping Aaron Judge long term. That's how a franchise is built. You stagger your payroll obligations if you as best as you can. That by the time that the expensive hitters are coming due, that you have cheap young pitching, and by the time they're due, the expensive hitters have either retired or at the point of their career where they're that they're
They're
earning
gonna take.
less, like Brett Gardner, or that yeah you've moved on from them, and that you have new young hitting. So and ultimately the Yankees will be the Yankees, and that's the biggest thing that I would say we found out from this offseason, that Garrett Cole pushes them very close, if not past that third tax bracket where they they lose their top draft pick and a couple of others as well, along with international money. Now they could recoup that by trading Hap away, but that's that's the Yankees
That's not
signal.
happening.
Yeah, that's the Yankees signaling that the last several years where they were building from within. That yes, that can get them into consistent playoffs, but that can't get them over the hump to the World Series. And that they need to go spend and get that one guy who they know can push them over the hill. And I think
No,
the Dodgers are reaching that realization as well, that you need to spend to get that one guy who can get you a World Series. And once you get that World Series, whatever happens for the rest of his contract is vindicated.
no, there's two more things. I guess two and a half. But um, first, to cycle back to the uh, injured pitchers for the Yankees, where does Dylan Betances stand? And why don't the Red Sox spend more money? Their owner has more money than the Steinbrenners. Why
The,
doesn't why don't they spend more money?
the Red Sox thing, it's a big enigma of the last year, because you think that the Red Sox wouldn't stand for Garrett Cole, the best pitcher in the market, going to their rivals,
Yep.
but this seems to be that the Red Sox seem to have more austerity right now than even the Mets. Honestly, that the Mets went out and signed two starting pitchers, even though they only really needed one. But the Red Sox seem to be this seems to be a contraction phase where they shouldn't really be contracting. If anything, they need to be doubling down. Sign Mookie Betts, uh, fix that rotation by trading a guy and then signing another one. But I don't know. As with Dellin Betances, from what I hear, that the Yankees seem to be saying thanks for the last several years. Have fun with your next contract. From what I heard, the Dodgers are actually kicking the tires on him, as well as the Minnesota Twins.
Yeah, I would hate to lose Betances because he's been so good these last several years.
Well,
Um,
aside from holding runners on.
yeah, that and he does break down towards the end of the year, which I was hoping wouldn't happen this year,
Well,
considering he missed the
he
first
yeah. The problem is
half,
he
and then
completely broke down,
yeah, he
as in he wrecked his arm,
yeah, um, yeah. So no, I thought it was the foot when he like stepped off.
or whatever it is. But he
It
basically physically wrecked himself.
yeah, yeah. So no, it was the arm to start, which pushed him back towards the back
Yeah,
half of
and
the
then he
year,
threw
and
to
then
all of two batters.
yeah, which were both strikeouts, which showed he still had everything.
Yeah,
Which
just
I was excited to have
yeah,
as like an extra good arm to get you through that postseason.
and he's
Um,
gone.
which then brings into next year what you have to face, what, a minimum of three batters now,
Yeah, which
which is
wouldn't
gonna
have affected
change a
him.
lot. No, he's still capable of that, but that brings in like the whole like lefty specialist sort of thing and all that BS. Um, but then it's sort of with rosters not expanding to 40,
Hmm.
and you're only getting like what 26, 27, whatever it is on your
Yeah,
roster come
I think
September
28.
28.
Yeah, you get an extra three got or 29 because I forget that players uh, as a whole they have an extra roster slot on each team now, so it's now 26-man rosters.
Yeah, and then there's like a minimum for however many bench players you can have. That
Yeah.
way you can't rotate a bunch of pitchers in and out like the Yankees sort of loopholed and abused. But
Yeah, well, it wasn't just them that the Brewers
yeah,
used that to excellent fashion the last 2 years, especially considering that the Brewers have and will have a mediocre rotation for the foreseeable future, and get by on that a lights out relief core and very solid hitting.
and then I
But
guess sort of the last thing I want to touch upon, which it's sort of gone a little quiet, especially with like Cole and everything else, and with the Astros and their gate thing. Uh, where does Clint Frazier stand on everything? I mean, are they just gonna trade him at this point and maybe get some of that international money that they're gonna lose?
I mean,
Uh,
oddly enough, right now Clint Frazier's the starting left fielder because with Hicks out, the alignment is Judge, Gardner, and Frazier. So barring any other signing or anyone like an Estevan Florial coming up, that Frazier's the starting outfielder.
well, what about what's his name? Ford or Talkman?
Ford,
One of
uh,
the mics.
yeah, I think we touched upon this last week that the situation with Ford ties directly into the three-way situation between Urshela and Duhar and
Voight.
Voigt, and Ford's kind of that fourth option, the nuclear option, if all else fails, because he's not really looked upon a lot because he had he basically had to work his way from scratch as an undrafted free agent.
Mm-hmm.
That it's amazing that he even got to this point and even succeeded to the point that he did. That's very rare for an undrafted free agent. The only one I could think of that had very good success as an undrafted free agent was Kevin Millar.
Mm.
But I would say he's the backup first baseman by default, much like with Austin Romine departing for Detroit. That um, Kyle Higashioka will be the default backup. Although I've heard rumblings that they're looking at Martin Maldonado as
Yes,
someone who's
because
familiar with Garrett Cole.
yep. Yeah, you
But
always forget like how important the chemistry between a pitcher and their catcher is,
oh yeah,
and
yeah until
certain pit. Who was it on the Mets last year that flipped out?
most of them over
Yeah,
Wilson Ramos. And
yeah,
remember, closer to Yankee home, uh, AJ Burnett with
Burnett.
Jorge Posada.
Yep, yeah.
That was
Those
a
two
match.
just could not coexist.
Yeah, that was a match made in the fires of hell,
Yeah, I don't
and
know
it
what
showed
went
every
down
time.
there, but yeah,
It
they
was just the
couldn't.
bad matchup of a pitcher who was wild in the strike zone and a catcher who could not move like he used to anymore.
Yeah. Um,
But overall, I'd say, how would you say this winter meetings has gone? Because I would give this a solid A,
I'd give it
maybe
a
an A minus, but
I'd
an
give it
A.
like a B plus. I like that a lot of guys had signed, the big guys anyway. I was just expecting maybe like a couple really big high profile trades, like maybe like Lindor or Kluber.
Yeah, I'd say that's the one thing that was lacking.
That
We've
that's
had
that that's what sort of like doesn't get me into that A bracket. I didn't get to see like a really big trade happen,
Yeah, we
and
saw the groundwork of a lot of trades being
yeah.
laid out, like Chris Bryant. I didn't even mention David Price being
Mm.
available.
So that's the only thing was the trades. But other than that, I thought it was pretty productive, especially like we said compared to the
Oh,
last
hi
couple of
Zoe.
years.
Hi Zoe.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think
she.
Zoe's telling us we're running a little long.
Yeah, my dad's playing ball with her, even though my
Yeah,
door is closed. I guess microphones pick up everything.
technology is amazing, but yeah, that's kind of saying that we're at the end of our time. So,
Yep. All
Joe,
right.
glad taking us in this retrospective.
All right. This was great. We'll have to touch more upon as more things happen, because for sure all the more dominoes are gonna fall.
Yeah, we got to have that trade episode when that happens.
Yeah. Yeah. All right.
All
I'll
right,
catch you later.
see ya.
Bye.